Mr. Chairman, I applaud you for bringing these panelists together. Very interesting presentation. I come from southern Arizona. I notice in the map that unfortunately I'm not in one of the NERPs. I'm not sure how that happened because I've got the best district in the whole country with great environmental resources. But that being said, I'd like to comment on being in the Colorado Rocky area last year where driving for over an hour, I mean, the horror of looking across the thousands and thousands of miles of acres of these beautiful, beautiful pine trees that are now turning red and turning ashen gray and are dying. And I think about the fact that in Arizona we are suffering from a very long, prolonged drought. I think it's estimated that we've lost about a fifth of our forest due to infestation of bark beeters and these mega fires that are happening and what's happening, again, just with climate changes in general. So I'm curious if someone can talk specifically about the effects of climate and water. I know that there's the Los Alamos and also the Southern Nevada NERP that exists, but I'm wondering whether or not any of these facilities are specifically focused on the understanding of the hydrological cycle in arid areas. And also, if someone also could tie in whether or not there's coordination. For example, the University of Arizona, we have very many eminent climate scientists, specifically at the College of Science, and whether or not there's that coordination collaboration taking place.
Yeah, the Los Alamos Environmental Research Park originally was studied as a hydrology study, and it became from original funding to study radionuclide passage, and they were worried about groundwater contamination. So that was the origin, and that's why and then they happened to move into studying trees, and that's why they just happened to document the water stress and the water aspects of tree mortality. I agree with you about Colorado. Skiing there is not quite what it used to be with all the dead trees, and that's happening all over the place right now. As for Arizona, you indeed have some of the world's leading experts at the University of Arizona on this subject. And in fact, I talked about climate change type drought. Well, that label came from Professor Beshears at the University of Arizona. He actually used to sit in my office at Los Alamos before he came to Arizona. So there is a good collaboration. We don't have current funding to do that. It's all, again, it's PI-driven type research, but there's a lot of dialogue. I mean, Dave and I emailed together last night about that. So, Paul?
I just want to comment that the Nevada test site has hosted in the past precipitation studies in the arid system that's there, along with elevated CO2 studies, complementary and not specifically coordinated, but also funded by the Department of Energy, have been elevated CO2 and precipitation studies on the Oak Ridge Reservation, and similar observational work goes on at the Argonne National Lab on Fermilab land. The point being that the Office of Science has funded a lot of these studies taking advantage of the NERP lands.
I'm going to let the gentlelady continue for 2 more minutes if she likes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed from the testimony that a major focus of the NERP seemed to be to look at the traditional sources of energy, specifically fossil fuels, on the environment. We spent a lot of time in this committee talking about renewables. I'm dedicated to particularly solar energy because of where I come in Arizona and the potential that solar has for the desert Southwest. I know that there is a minimal environmental impact even on renewables that are supposed to be, quote unquote clean. So I'm curious whether or not there's any research happening at the National Environmental Parks on understanding and mitigating the environmental impacts of renewables as well, fossil fuels.
To my knowledge, that's not being done. I don't know if my colleagues.
No active on-the-ground research in the Oak Ridge Reservation, but a number of analyses have been looked at to determine what could be done with the National Environmental Research Park to provide some component of the energy needs of the Oak Ridge National Lab and surrounding DOE facilities. But I could look up more information on that if you'd like.
No, I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, as we all know, as states and the country moves towards a national renewable energy standard, we're going to be seeing a rapid increase and a ramping up of renewables, and we don't quite understand them. In this committee, and the full committee, I think during the markup, I wanted to include the studying of photovoltaics when it comes to recycling on a bill that we had earlier. Unfortunately, that didn't get included, but we need to know more about how these renewables are affecting our environment as well. So thank you.
We do.